This is a response to mardvegas, and I believe he has a couple other accounts, including anthonymilessee. I saw a couple videos by both of them, and it seems to be the same voice and same basic arguments used over and over, so maybe he has a couple others too. This guy really hates atheists. I don't know if he had a bad experience with an atheist, or he seems like the kind of guy that really wants to be smart. And I don't know, maybe sometime in the past he lost an argument with a particularly smug atheist and really bruised his ego, and he's been on a vendetta ever since or something. I don't know. Something about atheism really pisses this guy off. I'll post a link to the video in the video description to a couple of his videos in case he doesn't accept this as a response. Actually, I don't think he even accepts video responses. Basically, in each of his videos, he repeats the argument from reason in different words. Now, the argument from reason is one of the lesser-known arguments for the existence of God. It's similar to the argument, that argument about morality. If God doesn't exist, then how do we know right from wrong? But it's more about, if God doesn't exist, then how do we know X from B, A from B, that type of thing. I think that the argument from reason is a little stronger than the argument from morality because, I say that because a stronger argument can be made that the laws of logic are objective than can be made that there are moral absolutes, even though I believe that this guy thinks that morality is objective. Basically, the argument consists of three premises. 1. The laws of logic and reason are immutable, unchanging, absolute, non-spatial. He uses that word, non-spatial. I don't really know how that's relevant, but non-spatial, universal, eternal, etc., etc. Laws of logic, basically, the laws of logic will never change in this universe or any other universe. A non-orange can never be an orange. Okay, premise number 2, since these laws of logic are all of these adjectives, then the source of the laws of logic must also have these characteristics. Premise number 3, non-belief in a supreme being cannot account for these characteristics, but belief in a supreme being can. Based on these three premises, he concludes that atheism is irrational since, ironically, atheists try to use logic and reasoning to disprove certain deities and some concept of a deity altogether, and cannot account for the source or the foundation of the logic and reasoning which they use. According to him, only God has the, quote, ontological stature to supply a, quote, certain epistemology. In other words, only God, as he defines him, can account for all the laws of logic, as he defines them. First, the premises. Number 1, how do we know that the laws of logic are immutable? I mean, you assume they are, and I think it's safe to assume that anyone who attempts to use logic in any way assumes that they're, at the very least, objective. But I don't think that this premise is really as strong as you think it is. And besides, if it were true, and the laws of logic really were immutable, there's an issue with them. I'll get to that later. The second premise, you are saying that the laws of logic need a source. If by source you mean that they must be based on something apart from themselves, again, that shows that they are not actually immutable. If there is any kind of causal relationship between any source of the laws of logic and the laws themselves, then any change in the source would likewise cause a change in the laws of logic. Same thing goes for mathematics. In our universe, 2 + 2 = 4, and it's hard to imagine any other universe where that's not true. However, this is an assumption. For instance, our understanding of quantum physics doesn't have this strict causality of events. In fact, on the quantum level, from my understanding of it, an orange really can be a non-orange at the same time. But again, I'll accept this premise and move on. In fact, I'll accept both premises and move on. The third idea, that God alone provides the answer, is a complete fallacy. Just because we can't currently account for something doesn't mean that it doesn't have an explanation independent of an invisible man in the sky. At one time, we couldn't account for thunder. Now, we have a natural explanation. There's a lot of work being done right now in the cognitive sciences, and there's a lot of people, a lot of philosophers that still have this question about epistemology. Now, I don't really read up on cognitive sciences and epistemology that much, but it is possible that the answers lie in our own brains, not in the cosmos, not in anything external. Also, God may in some way provide some degree of an explanation, but how then do you explain God? You haven't provided an answer, you've just moved the question. You haven't explained anything at all. Your conclusion is a complete non sequitur. Simply stating by fiat that God alone provides the, quote, ontological stature to supply the source of the immutable laws of logic doesn't make it so. In fact, this is just a God of the gaps argument. You don't know where the laws of logic came from, so it has to be God. You're ignoring the possibility that it's a simple function of the brain, or that our understanding of it is limited by our own subjective experience. Let me explain why God doesn't explain it with a question. And let's assume that your argument is actually valid. Let's assume everything is valid right now. And that the laws of logic are immutable and God is the source of all logic. Is God the source of logic, or does God have the ability to defy logic? In other words, is an orange always an orange because it's logical, or is an orange always an orange because God says so? The way I see it, there are only two options. Either God has the power to defy all logic, in which case that actually makes a lot of sense, as most of the arguments that I've heard from his existence defy all logic as well, or God is bound by certain fundamental laws of logic, and they exist independently of God. And if that's true, we don't need a God to explain them away.